We begin today at the Mishnah at the bottom of Daf Yud Amud Beis. Zok Heilige Mishnah. Ha'omer lachulun she'oichelach. So what is this Mishnah saying? This Mishnah is very bekitzer. Before we go through the details of the Mishnah, the basic source and the point of what this Mishnah is speaking about is how a person makes a neder. A person can make a neder in two ways. I think I mentioned this in the beginning of the Masechta. You can make a neder just by saying that this object should be asa to me. So that's a neder. But another very usual way of making a neder, which the Masechta speaks about, is what's called hatfasa. Hatfasa means I say this object should be like a matvis. I connect it like something else. What's that something else? Like a carbon. Why do we always use the term of a carbon? So as we'll see later in the Masechta, another few blot over here, that when you say that something should be aser with a neder like something else, if you say that it should be aser like something else which is aser, like a piece of chazer or any other food that's not kosher, the neder will not take effect. Because that object is aser l'chatchila. You're trying to create a neder by your mouth now bringing a new isser on this item that was mutter. The only way it could be matvis, which means that you're connecting and you're bringing the isser from something else to this object here by saying that this object should be like a carbon, is a carbon. A carbon is a good example because carbon is also something which is an animal that was mutter, and now you will makdish it as a behemoth to be a carbon. That's what's called a davar hanodur. That itself is something that became asa through a neder. So when you're matfis, what you're doing is you're taking that neder that you placed already before on something else, and you're saying that this object should be a neder like that. That's the idea of what's called atfasa, when you create a neder through saying that this object should be like that. Okay, that's the concept of atfasa, which we're going to be learning this Mishnah and the next few Mishnahs here. So the Mishnah begins and says, a person that says, ha'omer la chulin she'oichelach. So the way to read this Mishnah is la, not li, but la chulin, with a patach. Person says, it should be, la chulin means not chulin. Or some maybe even our guidance over here in the Mishnah, loy chulin. Okay, the guidance said beferish, loy chulin. Okay, in our Mishnah we have la chulin she'oichelach. What I'll eat from you should not be chulin, which means what should it be? It should be a carbon. So that's hatfasi. He's saying that food should be a carbon. So, or he says loy kosher, that this food should not be kosher, or veloy dachi, it should not be pure, which means it's something which is aser. Or tahir. Over here when it says in the Mishnah, the word tahir, so the Ran says tahir over here also means that he said loy tahir, that this food should not be tahir. Okay, before I go weiter to the next cases, in all of these cases where he said loy kosher, loy dachi, and loy tahir, so the truth is, you can interpret this in two different ways. Either he's referring to something which is not kosher, and it's like chatchila aser, like I said before, like a piece of chazer or something like that, and then the neder will not take effect, because you're connecting it to something which is the chatchila aser. You have to connect it, the hatfas has to be to something which you made it aser by a neder. But when a person says this expression, loy kosher, loy dachi, it could go either way. This lashon includes in it could be something which is not pure, it's not kosher, because you made that aser by a neder, or it could be something which was the chatchila aser. So because it could go both ways, so therefore the cloud by the neder is, we go l'chumre by a neder, and we touch the words include in it to mean also that it's something which he made aser by a neder, and therefore it will become aser here as well. Another few examples the Mishnah says, tamei, a person says that this object should be like something which is tamei. So what does he mean by tamei? So again, it could be referring to something which is tamei l'chatchila, or it could be nothing to do with you. You didn't make it tamei by a neder. Or it could be referring to a carbon, to a behemoth that you made a carbon and is now tamei. Or noiser, pigul. Noiser and pigul, of course, are also from karbanis. Noiser is the leftover of a carbon that you didn't eat in the right time, and pigul is from a carbon that you had the wrong kavana, shaloi bizmano, to eat it shaloi bizmano when you brought the carbon. So if you say that an object should be like the pigul or or like the noiser, aser. All these cases, it becomes aser. Okay, we'll see in the Gemara more about this. The Gemara, going back to the first case of the Mishnah, very strange expression. The person says, loy chulin or la chulin, what I eat to you. What's the chiddush in this? That a person is using this backwards lashon. Instead of saying directly that what I eat from you should be a carbon, he's saying, loy chulin, oichelach. What's the chiddush in this? We'll see in the Gemara.
But also, by kosher he adds on the word loy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by Tahir, he adds on the word loy.
Correct.
But by Tameh, you can't say that.
Yeah, correct. By Tomei, Noisa, Pickle, you don't add the word loy.
Two opposites over there.
Yeah, Anachanami, it's two different things. Yeah, true.
No, in the Taich.
Okay, true, Anachanami. The Ran spells it out this way. There's an Arichis the Geran over here about this. Okay. Sagt the Mishnah weiter. Ke imra, a person says that this object should be like a imra, like a lamb. What is this referring to? It refers to a lamb that's generally brought as a carbon. Ke dirim, or it should be like the chamber in the Beis HaMikdash, where the behemoths, or not a chamber actually, the barn, where the behemoths in the Beis HaMikdash are kept for karbanis. Ke'etzim, like the wood, which means like the wood on the Mizbeach, used for the karbanis. Ke'ishim, like the fire on the Mizbeach. Ke-Mizbeach, like the Mizbeach, where the karbanis are brought. Ke-Heichel, this object should be like the Heichel, which is the Beis HaMikdash, where the karbanis are brought. Ke-Yerushalayim, like Yerushalayim, which means either Yerushalayim is the city where the karbanis are brought, or it's the city where the karbanis could be eaten. Kachin Kalim could be eaten in the entire city of Yerushalayim. Or the Mishnah continues, Nodar be'echad mikol misham shem mizbeach. He makes a neder and he mentions any of the different utensils that are used on the mizbeach. You have forks, you have different things that are used there in the mizbeach to turn over the carbon on the fire. Afal pi shaloi hiske carbon, even if he didn't clearly mention carbon, but he mentioned different names of things that are connected to the carbon. Hareze neder, hareze noda becarbon. So we consider this to be a proper neder, that he was neder in a carbon, and therefore it's going to be yaser. So over here, the chiddush, in one of the chiddushim in this case, is that he has to say ke imra. If a person is going to say that this object should be a imra, should be a lamb, it's not going to take effect, because what's a lamb? A lamb is not something which is awesome. But if he says it should be like a lamb, so then we touch and say, what kind of a lamb was he talking about? Mastami, he meant a lamb that's significant, that's usually brought for a carbon. Right, so then it's going to be awesome. But if you go back before in the Mishnah, when it said Tomei, Noiser, Pigel, over there it did not say Ke Tomei, Ke Noiser, and Ke Pigel. Over there, even if he just says that this object should be Tomei. Okay, so then even without the Chof Adimyon, it's also going to become like that thing, because over there, Tomei, Noiser, and Pigel, we know that he's talking about an object which is Aser. Imra, Dirim, Eitzim, we don't know if he's talking about something which is Aser or something which is Mutter. Dirim is just a barn, Eitzim is just wood. When he says Kid Dirim, Keitzim, that added Chof is showing that he means something specific and significant, so therefore we say that we're going to be Machmer to taich his Lashon to mean that it refers to a carbon, an aspect of a carbon, and therefore he's saying it should be also like a carbon. Sagt the Mishnah weiter, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ha'omer Yerushalayim, a person says that this object should be Yerushalayim, so he wants to be matvis, he wants to take the from Yerushalayim, that it should be like Yerushalayim, Lo Yamaklum, he said nothing. Yerushalayim, the city of Yerushalayim itself is not something which is not a place which is Aser, and therefore, if you say Ki Yerushalayim, so you mean like what happens in the city of Yerushalayim. What happens in the city of Yerushalayim? You bring karbanis there, you eat karbanis there, but if you just say Yerushalayim, the city of Yerushalayim itself is not something which is Aser, so the neder doesn't take effect. Sagt the Gemara, Savrua, so it was assumed that the pshat in the Mishnah is as follows. Now usually in Shas, when it uses the expression of Savrua, it's just an original, it's a Havamina, but eventually the Gemara refutes it, but not here. The Gemara uses this term Savrua, but this is the pshat in the Mishnah. My la chulin, when it uses the term la chulin with a pasach, what does that mean? Loi chulin. Loi chulin levi. So basically what this person is saying is that this food of yours should not be chulin, ela carbon. Rather it should be a carbon. So what's the chiddush of our Mishnah? What's the Mishnah saying here? That in such a case the neder takes effect. Says the Gemara, Mani mas nisin, who is the Tana of our Mishnah? Rab Meir, if our Mishnah would follow the opinion of Rab Meir, but it can't be, because lastly, Rab Meir does not hold miklalav atishemei that when a person says that it should not be this, I understand that he means that it should be something else. Rab Meir does not hold of that. So over here, what's the chiddush of our Mishnah? He never clearly said that this object should be a carbon. But since he says that it should not be cholim, from that you understand that what he means to say is, what should it be? It should be a carbon. It should be also like a carbon. But Rav Meir holds we don't interpret a person's words this way. If a person said clearly it should be a carbon, it'll be a carbon. If a person just said it should not be cholin, so then we don't know what it should be. We're not going to explain ourselves what it should be, so it should not take effect. Where did Rab Meir say this? Nan, learned in the Mishnah, Rab Meir says, Rab Meir Oimer, Kol Tnai, She'ene Tnai B'nei Gad B'nei Reuven. Anytime a person makes a condition. So let's say, for example, a person is selling something, and then he makes a condition that the sale should only take effect under such circumstances. So if he's not going to spell out the Tnai, like Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven did when they made a Tnai with Moshe Rabbeinu to be able to inherit the territory on the other side of the Yarden, ain't a Tnai. It's not going to be a Tnai. Now what does it mean over there, the Tnai Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven? So over there, they spelled out the Tnai, which is called a Tnai Kofel, a double expression, meaning they clearly said, if we're going to join the Yidden and enter into Eretz Yisrael, to conquer the land with them, so then we're gonna inherit our territory here in Ever HaYarden, on the other side of the Yarden. If we're not gonna join them, then we're not gonna inherit. They said both. They didn't just say if we're not gonna go, we're not gonna inherit here. And from that we understand if they will go, they will inherit here. They said both. They said both sides. So same thing when a person makes a Tanai. For anything, anytime a person makes a Tanai for a sale and he wants the sale should be contingent on the fulfillment of this Tanai, you have to say a Tanai Kofel. If these and these circumstances are, so then the sale should take effect. If these and these circumstances do not happen, so then the sale should not take effect. Only if you say it, both, the Tnai Kofel, then it takes effect. That's what Rav Meir says. And we're not going to say, if a person is going to say the Tnai, we're automatically going to understand. If he says, I'm only selling you this property because I'm planning to move to Eretz Yisrael, so automatically you understand that. And if I don't move to Eretz Yisrael, so then it will not take effect. Rav Meir does not say that. You can't say Miklal Lav at the Shemei Hein or Miklan Hein at the Shemei Lav. You have to spell it out in both ways. So therefore, according to Rav Meir, in our Mishnah as well, when a person says La Chulin, which means Loi Chulin Shaichalach, that your food is not Chulin, I'm not going to interpret that to mean that what is it? It's going to be a carbon. So our Mishnah can't be Rav Meir. Okay, this is just another two details here, a little bit. We have to a little bit take from what the Ran says here and from what other Mefarshim say. There's so little in the actual page of the Gemara. So the Ran says that really this halacha of Rav Meir and the way it was originally by Bnei Gad Bnei Reuven was regarding monetary items or regarding halachas of dinei mamanis when it comes to making a sale and things that are negate to dinei mamanis. That's originally where it says by Bnei Gad Bnei Reuven. And we also applied negate to kedushin as well and by gittin that the tnai has to be a double tnai. Over here, l'chayr we're speaking about a neder. A neder is not something which has anything to do with mammon. It's an issue of isser. When a person, the Torah says, a person makes a neder, your words have the power to create a isser. Who says the opinion of Rav Meir regarding a tnai that's used by monetary items and things that relate in some way to money, relates over here to the halacha of a neder, which is an isser? So the Ran says, you're right, the concept of a neder is a concept of an isser, that's the main chiddush of a neder, but nevertheless, it also affects the monetary value of this, the fact that you can't eat from it, so then you have no monetary rights to it anymore. You don't have the ability to touch it, or to eat it, or to have a no from it. So it also has a shaykhis to the momminess of it, to the value of it. And therefore the Gemara is comparing what Rav Meir said to what it says over here. Okay, the Gemara continues, so the Gemara says, so who is our Mishnah? El Rabbi Yehuda. So our Mishnah must go according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that by a Tnai, you don't have to make a double Tnai. If you say what you want, then we understand that if that doesn't happen, then you don't want the sale to take effect. Same thing over here, you say that this food should not be chulim, we understand that means that it should be a carbon. So it's Rabbi Yehuda. If so, Amos Sefer, look at what it says in the end of the Mishnah. It's the last line of the Mishnah. It said, Rabbi Yehuda Oimer. Rabbi Yehuda comes and says, Oimer Yerushalayim. A person says, this object should be Yerushalayim, lo yom haklom. He said nothing. Yerushalayim itself is not something which has any kedusha or isser in it, so you said nothing. So what would we simply understand from this? With the Sefer Rabbi Yehuda, if we see that Rabbi Yehuda is arguing in the end of the Mishnah, so Reisha Lav Rabbi Yehuda. So that means that the Mishnah before this is not Rabbi Yehuda. So how can we say that it's not Rabbi Yehuda if we clearly proved just now that the beginning of the Mishnah can't be Rabbi Meir and it must be Rabbi Yehuda? And says the Gemara, Kula Rabbi Yehuda. No, you have to say that the entire Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. V'hachi katani. And this is how you learn the last line of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda is not arguing on the rest of the Mishnah, but he's coming to explain what it said right before this in the Mishnah. And instead of reading it Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, you read it Shed Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, because Rabbi Yehuda said, right, it said right before this in the Mishnah, a person that says that this object should be Ke Yerushalayim, so then it becomes Asar. So on that, Rabbi Yehuda says, only if you said Ke Yerushalayim, like something in Yerushalayim, then it refers to a carbon in Yerushalayim. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda said, Yerushalayim lo yom haklom. If you say that this should be Yerushalayim, then Yerushalayim itself, the city Yerushalayim itself is not Asar, so then lo yom haklom. But if you say Ke Yerushalayim, then I say it refers to the carbon in Yerushalayim. So the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. But now the Gemara asks Sastira on this itself. V'chi Omar Ke Yerushalayim, when a person says the term Ke Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yehuda mi mitzvah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, would it then become us? And now that he's saying that the whole mission is Rabbi Yehuda, does Rabbi Yehuda take a hold when you say like that this object should be like Yerushalayim? Does it become usher? But Tanya, but in the Braisa we learned Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Ha'aimer Ke Yerushalayim. A person says this object should be like Yerushalayim. Lo yama klum. He didn't say anything. Even when he says Ke Yerushalayim, we still say that it refers to the city of Yerushalayim and not to the karbanis brought in Yerushalayim. And lo yama klum. Until he spells out his neder, something more specific regarding the karbanis that are brought in Yerushalayim. Like the Mishnah said, it has to be something closer to the carbon itself. It has to be like the eitzim or the imra, the lamb itself, or the deer where the behemoths are. Yerushalayim is too general. Yerushalayim, the city Yerushalayim, where the karbanis are brought, that's too far from the karbanis itself, and therefore the neder will not take effect. It just means the city Yerushalayim. And for the Gemara, you're right, Rabbi Yehuda, we still have to say that our Mishnah does go like Rabbi Yehuda, but v'trei Tanai, I'll leave the Rabbi Yehuda, we'll have to say that there are two Tanaim that are arguing what Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is. In our Mishnah, he says, Ki Yerushalayim does refer to the Karbanis in Yerushalayim, and according to the Braisa, Ki Yerushalayim refers to the city of Yerushalayim, and therefore it's not going to be Asr. Tanya, Zakta Gemara, we learned in a Braisa. Chulin, ha-chulin, ke-chulin. Person uses any of these expressions of chulin, bein sha'aychalach. So now, how did he finish the statement? Whether he says chulin sha'aychalach, what I eat from you is chulin, or bein shaloi aychalach, or if the person says that what I do not eat from you is chulin, mutter. Either way, it's going to be mutter. Okay, so now obviously when a person says that what I eat from you should be chulin, obviously it's mutter. He's saying that it should be chulin, right? But even when the person says that what I do not eat from you should be chulin, it's also not going to be considered a neder. And the Gemara is going to explain why, as we'll see. Okay, then the Braisa says, if the person says, la chulin sha'aychalach, aser. The person says, la chulin, what I eat from you, so then it will be aser. So this second case of this Braisa sounds exactly like what it says in the Mishnah. Right, that's what the Mishnah said, that if a person says la chulin with a pasach, that means loy chulin sha'aychalach, and therefore we say miklal heina to shemei alav, and that means that what should it be? It should be a carbon, so therefore it becomes aser. But there's a problem with this second case of the Braisa, and the Ran and many others are not guiding it, but we'll see in a moment what the problem is. But first let's go right in the Braisa. What's if the person...
In this case, in the first case?
No, in the first case he said...
It says ke and it says le?
La. Over here he said la chulin. In the first case he just said chulin, ha chulin, ki chulin. Over here he said la chulin. La chulin shaychalach means what I eat from you is not chulin. So for that we understand, what is it? A carbon. So it's aser. What's if the person says la chulin loy oichalach? What I do not eat from you should not be chulin. So then mutter. So then what did he say? He said nothing. What I don't eat from you should not be chulin. So what should it be? It should be a carbon. But he's referring to something that he's not eating from him. But what I am eating from you is still allowed. So he basically said nothing. And this seems very simple. Mutter. That will be mutter. This is the Braisa. So in our Braisa and the Girsa we have three different cases. Again, the first case is a person saying chulin. Either he says sha'aychalach or he says shaloi aychalach. Either way, it says it's going to be mutter. Then the middle case, la chulin, that seems just like what we learned in the Mishnah. And then when he says la chulin lo aychalach, then he says that's nothing, so it's mutter. So the Gemara is going to point out that there's a contradiction in who the Tan of the Mishnah is, or the Braisa is. Reisha, sagt the Gemara, Reisha Mani. Who is the beginning of the Braisa? Rab Meir, it seems like the Reisha of the Braisa is Rab Meir, the less lay. Rab Meir does not hold miklalav shemei hein, that when a person says the negative, that we will understand from this the positive as well. Why? Because what did it say in the first case of the Braisa? Chulin loy oichalach, right? In the first case of the Braisa, it said either the person said chulin oichalach, or he said chulin loy oichalach. So regarding the case when the person said chulin oichalach, that's pashut that he's saying that your food should be chulin to me. So of course it's mutter. But what's about the case when the person said chulin loy oichalach? So shouldn't we say, what is he saying? What I don't eat from you is chulin. But from that we could understand the klal lava to shemeya hang. What I do eat from you is a carbon. And still, what did the Braisa say? It's mutter. So we see that the Reisha of this Braisa is going like Rab Meir that says that we don't interpret the person's words, that if he said the negative, we understand from this the positive. So the Reisha of the Mishnah, we see Rab Meir. Okay, now the Gemara is going to ask a stira to the seifa of the Braisa that we see in another Mishnah that Rav Meir disagrees to the seifa of this Braisa. But let me just for a moment go back now to the middle case of the Braisa. Now you'll understand why many Rishonim are not good as the middle case of the Braisa. The middle case of the Braisa, la chulin she'oichel loch aser, which is the case brought in our Mishnah, the Gemara already said before befedish that case does not fit with Rav Meir. La chulin lo'oichel loch, the only reason why it should be aser is because I say mikla lav at shemei hein. He said the negative, that it should not be chulin, and from that we understand that it should be a carbon. So the Ran, all the Mefarshim asked the question, if the Gemara just now says that this Braisa is not like Rav Meir, like we see from the first case in the Braisa, how could the second case in the Braisa, or is Rav Meir, sorry, right? So then how could the second case of the Braisa say, La chol n'shaloi chalach, as Aser? So that's why the Ran says many are not good as this. But there is, just to say one opinion here, Taisvis does say that there is a way to explain this, that maybe this that the Gemara said regarding the Mishnah, that over there, La chulin she'oichelach is going to be asa, and that's not like Rav Meir. So if you remember, the Bach is guided in the Mishnah loy chulin. So maybe that's only over there where he actually spells out loy chulin. Over here, he said la chulin she'oichelach. So maybe there's a difference. There's a difference between loy chulin and la chulin. Maybe that's what the Taisus over here says. Okay, I remember exactly. I don't know if I'm saying it exactly right, but as I said, most Mefarshim are not guided the middle case of this Mishnah. Okay, let's continue the Gemara. So now the Gemara says, so we know that the Reisha is Rav Meir. Rav Meir holds that we don't say, if he said the negative, we understand the positive. Now what was the seifa of the Mishnah? Aim is seifa, the Braisa that is. The last case of this Braisa is, La chulin lo yoichalach. A person says that it should not be chulin, what I do not eat from you. So mutter, that's mutter, because it sounds like he said nothing. But the Gemara now brings from a Mishnah later that he says a very similar lashon, and there Rav Meir says that it actually will be aser. Vatnan, the Mishnah says, what happens if a person says la carbon, lo yoichalach, a carbon or la carbon, what I do not eat from you? What happens then? Rav Meir aser. Rav Meir says that it's going to be aser. Now, why does Rav Meir say that this is aser? The kashilon, and the question was asked on that. Don't we say that Rav Meir holds that I don't understand when a person says the negative, that I interpret the positive from his words? So when a person says la carbon la yoichalach, what is he saying? What I don't eat from you should not be a carbon. So from that we can understand what I do eat from you should be a carbon. But Rav Meir doesn't hold of this. Rav Meir says we don't interpret a person's words this way, that we understand from the negative the positive. So why did Rav Meir they say that it's aser? And on that it was explained. V'omer Rav Abba. Rav Abba says, no, we understand his words differently. Nase ka'omer. We read and we understand his statement differently. We say, Nase ka'omer lekarbin yehei. What he's saying is, lekarbin, it should be. Kama. And then, lefichach lo yoichalach. And therefore I will not eat it from you. So he wasn't saying the food that I'm not eating from you should not be a carbon. Adarabba, what he meant to say is le carbon yehei. Your food should be a carbon. And when he finishes off lo yoichalach, he's just finishing off the result. Therefore, I will not eat it from you. That's what he meant to say. Okay, so now if that's how we interpret the person's words according to Rav Meir, so coming back now to this Braisa, so Hachanami here as well, what did the person say? Over here the person said, La chulin lo yoichalach. So why shouldn't we say here this is the same thing? That I should say, Hachi kama, this is what the person meant to say, Lo chulin lehevi. Your food should not be chulin for me. And then when he concluded lo yoichalach, he's just saying the result. He's just saying, lefichach, therefore, lo yoichalach, therefore I will not eat it from you. That's how Rav Meir understands this. In other words, when a person says lo yoichalach, you could either be saying that he's referring to food that he's not eating from him, or he's not referring to food that he's not eating from him. Why would a person tell something to his friend about food that he's not eating from him? He's referring to food that he is eating from him. And Adarabba, he's coming to say the result of my words. The result of my words now is that I will not eat from you. That's what Rav Meir holds. So the problem over here is we have now a stira in this Braisa. The reisha of this Braisa is Rav Meir. Because Rav Meir holds we do not say Miklal Lav at Shemei Hein, and that's why in the reisha of the Braisa when a person says Chulin, Loi Oichalach, chulin loy oichalach, it's going to be mutter. And then when it comes to the last case of the Braisa, we don't follow Rav Meir that says that you insert this word lefichach, that he's saying that the result is that it should be aser. And it says the Gemara, Hai Tana, so you're going to have to say that this Tana of this Braisa is not Rav Meir. Savalak Rav Meir b'chada, he holds like Rav Meir in one aspect, which is the first case of the Braisa, which is he holds like Rav Meir that we do not say Miklal Lav at Shemei Hein. But and he disagrees with Rav Meir regarding the seifa of the Braisa, regarding this idea that I stick in the word lefichach, that when a person says loy chulin loy oichalach, I will not say that he's saying lefichach loy oichalach. I say he's saying the food that I will not eat from you will not be chulin. So he said nothing. So therefore it won't be a neder. So he agrees to Rav Meir in one aspect and he argues with Rav Meir in another aspect. Okay, so the Gemara explains this. He holds like Rab Meir the less le miklal lavat shemei hein, that is not holding the reisha miklal lavat shemei hein, so therefore it's mutter in the reisha or palagaleh b'chada b'carbon. And he disagrees with him regarding the seifa of the Braisa, regarding the case where the person says carbon, and the Mishnah that was quoted from later, where over there it says when a person says le carbon lo yichalach, and over there Rab Meir says it means lefichach lo yichalach. Regarding that, he disagrees with Rab Meir. Rav Ashi gives a different answer. It depends what the person says. The vowelization. If the person says lachulin or a person says lichulin, it's a big difference. Hada Omar lachulin. Over here in our Braisa, the person said lachulin. He says it should not be chulin. So therefore over here where he says it should not be chulin, what I will not eat from you. So in such a case, I'm not going to interpret it to mean it should not be chulin, and therefore I will not eat it from you. Over here I read it together. It should not be chulin, what I do not eat from you. And therefore I say that it doesn't take effect. Or even if you are going to teach the words that the person meant to say, loy chulin, it will not be chulin, and therefore I will not eat it from you. The neder will still not take effect because Rav Meir holds he only said the negative, and we don't deduce from this the positive that it will be a carbon. Okay, so even if you will touch lefichach, it still will not become aser according to Rav Meir. And over there in the Mishnah later, this that we understood from the Mishnah later, that in such a case it would be aser. V'ha da Omar loy l'chulin. He said loy chulin, or the Bachya says not lechulin, but loy chulin. The mashma loy leheve chulin ela carbon. He's saying it should not be chulin, but it should be a carbon. So over there, I say he's saying loy chulin. It should be a carbon, and therefore loy yechalach. Over there, in such a case, it will be aser, even according to Rab Meir. So it depends if he says la or if he says loy. Okay, going to the next part of the Mishnah. One more piece here in the Gemara. The Mishnah said toir, Tomei, Noiser, Pigul, Aser. So these are various different things that are connected to a carbon, and it becomes Aser. So the Gemara now asks, in relation to a carbon, Boi Rami Bachame, Harei Alai Kibasa Zivche Shlamim. A person says that this, I take upon myself that this should be like the basa, the meat, from a carbon shlamim, La'achas Rikas Damim. After you spray the blood on the Mizbeach. Mahu, what's the halacha now? Does this become asr or not? What's the halacha of the shlomim after you spray the blood on the mizbeach? It's mutter for the kainim to eat it. After you sprayed it, now the kainim, it's totally mutter. So the Gemara asks, if so, what's the question? If the person actually said this lashon that you're just saying now, that this piece of meat here should be like this piece of basar of a shlomim that you already sprayed the blood on the mizbeach, so bad teira kamatvis. So he's saying that it should be like something else which is totally mutter. So why should there be any neder here? Ella says the Gemara, the case over here is kagon de machis basa zivche shlamim. It's lying on the table, a piece from a carbon shlamim, umachis the hatera gabe, and right next to it there's another piece of meat which is mutter for you to eat. And va'amar, and the person didn't say clearly that it should be like this piece of shlamim which the blood was already sprayed from it. But what he said is zeh kazeh. This piece of basa that's mutter should be like this piece of basa from the shlomim. Now, how do we interpret the words of what the person said? What does these words mean? Be'ikroi kamatvis. Is he saying that this piece of basa, which is mutter, should be like the shlomim, which what it was originally? What's a shlomim originally? A shlomim originally is a carbon which is kadosh and is also to eat. That's what he's saying here. Or perhaps, since this piece of shlomim that's on the table presently was already sprayed, the blood was already sprayed in the mizbech, and now it's mutter to eat. So I say I go according to the hayvet, to the present, and now it's mutter to eat, and therefore the lashon that he's saying does not mean any lashon of isser. So the question is, the lashon that the person is saying, what does it include in it? When he says zeh kazeh, is he going on the what the shlomim was originally or what the shlomim is now? That's the shayla over here. So the Gemara will bring various different ayahs to this, as we'll see in the continuation of the next summit.
Even now it's only mutter to kohanim.
And a Chanami, the Ran asks that question. That now it's still Aser, but it's only Aser to everybody else, and it's only Mutter to Kainim. So the Ran explains, but the fact that it's Aser to everybody else has nothing to do with his neder. Because mitzad his neder, it should be Aser to everybody, even to Kainim. Then what happens when you spray the blood? It becomes Mutter to the Kainim and Aser to everybody else. That's a different Isser, mitzad Kochim. And the klal by a neder is, whenever you want to be matfis a neder and something else, you have to be matfis it to something else, which is also mitzad the neder. And the shlamim originally was also mitzad your neder. But later, once you spray the blood, it's not also anymore mitzad your neder. It's also to everybody else because it's kochim, because after the zrika of the carbon, there's a new isser of kochim. And therefore it's mutter to the kainim. So therefore it's not going to be chal.